Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars through the main window. The ship had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 months now. It was quiet work, but someone had to do it. Earth needed to know what was happening beyond their borders. Jake was 42 years old and had spent most of his life in space. He fought in the wars on Mars when he was younger. Those battles taught him that space was dangerous and full of surprises. Today felt different, though. Something was coming. Captain called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her station. "I'm getting something strange on the communications array." Jake walked over to her console. Sarah was their best communications officer. If she said something was strange, it usually meant trouble. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked. "It's a signal, but not like anything I've seen before. It's coming through on every frequency at the same time. And sir, it's strong. Really strong." Commander Lisa Brooks looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien languages and cultures. The crew called her their translator, even though they had never met any real aliens before. "Can you put it through the speakers?" Lisa asked. Sarah nodded and pressed some buttons. The bridge filled with sounds that definitely did not come from human throats. It was like hearing a dozen different animals trying to talk at once. Some parts sounded like singing, other parts sounded like machines breaking down. "How many different languages is that?" Jake asked. Lisa was already working at her computer. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. "I count at least 300 different patterns, maybe more." "This is impossible, Captain. No one could broadcast in that many languages at once." The strange sounds continued for almost 10 minutes. Then everything went quiet. "Did we record it?" Jake asked. "Every second of it," Sarah replied. Jake turned to Lisa. "How long will it take you to figure out what they were saying?" "Give me 6 hours. Maybe less if I'm lucky." Jake nodded. "Get started." "Sarah, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we received an unknown signal and we're working to decode it." Lisa worked for the next 5 hours without taking a break. She used every translation program the ship had. Slowly, words began to make sense. When she finally understood what the message said, her face went white. "Captain," she called out, "you need to hear this." Jake came over to her station. The rest of the bridge crew gathered around too. I've translated about half of it. The message is the same in every language. It's a distress call, but not from one planet. It's from something called the Galactic Preservation Council. "Never heard of them," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis, their tactical officer. "They represent 40 different alien civilizations. And Captain, they're asking for help. Specifically, they're asking for help from us." Jake frowned. "From humans? Do they even know we exist?" Lisa looked at her screen again. "They call us Deathworlders. They say we come from a planet so dangerous that we evolved into something they've never seen before. They think we might be able to help them fight something they can't."
"Fight what?"
Ryan asked. Lisa's voice got very quiet. "Something called the Void Swarm. According to this message, it's already destroyed 12 star systems. Every time they try to fight it, their entire fleets disappear." Now the bridge went silent. Jake could hear the ship's engines humming in the background. "What exactly are they asking us to do?" Jake said. "They want us to send ships, as many as we can. They say the Void Swarm is heading toward the center of the galaxy, where most of their civilizations live. If it isn't stopped, billions will die." Ryan pulled up his tactical displays. "Captain, we don't even know where these aliens are. We've never fought anything like this before. But they think we can," Lisa said. "Listen to this part of the message." She played a section she had. Translated, the alien voice sounded desperate, even though Jake couldn't understand the original words. "They say humans come from a world of monsters. High gravity, poisonous air, deadly weather, and creatures that hunt in packs. They say we learn to survive things that would kill any other species in the galaxy." Jake thought about Earth. He remembered the training camps in Australia, where the heat could kill you, and ours. He thought about the deep ocean, where the pressure would crush a ship. He remembered the Amazon rainforest, where 1,000 different things could poison you. Maybe the aliens were right. Maybe Earth really was more dangerous than other planets. Captain Sarah said from her station, "I'm getting a response from Earth Command. Admiral Susan Clark's face appeared on the main screen. She looked serious. Captain Martinez, we received your report. How sure are you about this translation? Commander Brooks is our best linguist, Admiral. She says this is what the message means? I believe her. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Captain, if this is real, it changes everything. We're not just talking about first contact with aliens. We're talking about a war. Yes, ma'am. I'm ordering you to return to Earth immediately. We need to know everything about this message, and Captain. Yes, Admiral. Start thinking about what kind of fleet we'd need to fight, something that scares 40 alien civilizations. The transmission ended. Jake looked around his bridge crew. They all had the same expression he probably had. This was bigger than anything they had ever imagined. Sarah, set course for Earth. Maximum speed. Yes, sir. As the Liberty turned toward home, Jake wondered what they were getting into. Humans had always been good at fighting. Maybe it was time to find out just how good they really were. Admiral Susan Clark stood in the command center at Luna Station, watching through the massive windows as ships arrived from all over human space. She had never seen so many vessels in one place before. Battleships from Earth, cruisers from Mars, destroyers from the asteroid belt colonies, fighters from every human settlement within 50 light years. It had taken 2 weeks to assemble the fleet. Every nation on Earth contributed ships and crews. The Chinese sent their newest battleship, the Yangtze. The Americans brought the UES Washington, their most powerful dreadnought. The Europeans contributed a full squadron of destroyers. Even the small colonies sent what they could. 200 ships in total. Was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Captain Tony Garcia walked up to the Admiral, commanded the destroyer U.S. Phoenix, and had volunteered to lead one of the fast attack squadrons. Tony was young for a captain, but he had proven himself during the pirate raids near Jupiter. Admiral, the last ships just arrived. We're ready to begin loading supplies. Susan nodded. How long do you think it will take? Another day, maybe? 2, we're loading enough ammunition to fight a small war. It might not be small, Susan said quietly, down in the Marine section of the station. Colonel Amy Foster was preparing her ground forces. She had 3,000 Marines under her command, all volunteers. When word got out about the mission, more people wanted to join than they had room for. Amy walked through the training bays where her Marines were doing final equipment checks. These were not ordinary soldiers. Every one of them had trained in Earth's most dangerous places. They had survived combat exercises in the Sahara Desert, the Himalayan mountains, and the deep jungles of South America. Sergeant Dan Moore was checking his squad's gear. He was a big man from Texas who had served in 3 different wars. Mestizos. Squad called him Tank because nothing seemed to slow him down. Sergeant, are your people ready? Amy asked. Yes, ma'am. We've been ready since we heard about this mission. The boys are excited to show these aliens what humans can do. Amy smiled. She knew her Marines were tough, but she wondered if they really understood what they were getting into. Fighting aliens in space was different from anything they had done before. In the science section, Dr. Peter Kane was studying every piece of information it had about the Void Swarm. The aliens had sent more data after receiving Earth's response. What he learned worried him. The Void Swarm was not like any enemy humans had ever faced. The creatures lived in space and could survive without air or water. They traveled in huge groups and seemed to think as one mind. When they attacked a planet, they did not just conquer it, they consumed everything, turning the planet's material into more of themselves. Dr. Kane called up the data on his computer screen and studied the images. The swarm ships looked more like giant insects than anything. Built by intelligent beings, they had long, curved shapes with what looked like wings or fins. Some were small, like fighters. Others were massive, bigger than Earth's largest battleships. Computer, show me the attack patterns from the Kepler system battle. The screen displayed a 3-dimensional map of the battle. Red dots showed where swarm ships had attacked. Blue dots showed the defending alien fleet. Kane watched as the red dots swarmed around the blue ones, surrounding them completely before destroying them. They hunt in packs, he said to himself. Just like wolves. This gave him an idea. Humans knew how to fight pack hunters. They had been doing it for thousands of years on Earth. Commander Alex Murphy was in another part of the station, preparing his reconnaissance ships. Alex led a group of fast, stealthy vessels designed for scouting and gathering intelligence. His job would be to find the enemy and report back to the main fleet. Alex had handpicked his crews from pilots who had experience flying in dangerous conditions. Many of them had worked as asteroid miners or deep space explorers. They knew how to handle their ships in situations that would panic most people. Murphy to all recon pilots, he said into his communicator. Final briefing in 1 hour. Make sure your ships are ready for long-range operations. Back in the command center, Admiral Clark received a message from Earth. President Martinez appeared on her communication screen. The president looked tired, but determined. Admiral, the world is watching. Every news station on Earth is covering this mission. People are calling it humanity's greatest moment. I hope we can live up to that, Mr. President. You will. I have complete faith in you and your people. But Susan, I need you to understand something. This is not just about helping these aliens. This is about proving that humanity belongs among the stars. The transmission ended, and Susan looked out at her fleet again. Each ship carried hundreds of people who had volunteered to fight an enemy they had never seen, in places they had never been, for people they had never met. Captain Jake Martinez joined her at the window. His ship, the Liberty, would serve as the fleet's communication hub. Do you think we're making the right choice? Jake asked. Susan thought about the question. Earth was safe for now. They could have ignored the alien message and continued living their quiet lives. But that was not what humans did. When someone asked for help, humans answered, Jake, these aliens have been fighting this enemy for months and losing every battle. Their technology is probably better than ours. Their ships are probably faster and stronger. But they keep losing. So why do they think we can win? Susan smiled. Because we're not trying to preserve anything. We're not fighting to keep what we have. We're fighting to take something away from an enemy. That's what humans do best. The next morning, the fleet began its journey toward alien space. 200 ships carrying humanity's finest warriors, scientists, and explorers. They did not know what they would find when they arrived, but they knew they would face it together, as Earth grew smaller behind them. Admiral Clark made one final announcement to the fleet. People of the human fleet, we go now to answer a call. For help from civilizations we have never met. We do this because it is right and because we are human. Galaxy is about to learn what that means. The human fleet arrived at the Arcturus system 3 weeks after leaving Earth. Admiral Clark stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Washington, looking at the tactical display. What she saw made her stomach turn. The fourth planet in the system was half gone. Not destroyed by weapons, but eaten away like an apple with bites taken out of it. Massive chunks of rock and metal floated in space where the planet used to be. My God, whispered Commander Lisa Brooks, who had joined the fleet as their alien expert. They're actually consuming it. Captain Diana Ross was commanding the destroyer U.S. Atlanta at the front of the formation. Her ship was the first to detect the Void Swarm vessels. Diana had served in the Navy for 15 years and thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. Admiral, I count at least 50 enemy contacts, are attached to the planet's surface like giant bugs feeding on a carcass. Swarm ships were unlike anything in human design. They looked alive with curved hulls that pulsed and moved. Some were small, about the size of human fighters. Others were massive, longer than Earth's biggest aircraft carriers. They all had the same dark organic appearance. Dr. Peter Kane was studying the readings from his science station. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from those ships. They're not just taking the planet's material, they're converting it into something else. Into what? Admiral Clark asked. More ships? They're literally growing new vessels from the planet's mass. Major Kevin White was in the fighter bay of the Washington, preparing his bomber squadron for launch. Kevin had flown combat missions over Mars during the colonial wars. He knew how to hit targets that others couldn't reach. All bomber pilots, this is White, we're going in first to test their defenses. Stay close to your wingman and watch for new threats. 20 bombers launched from the human fleet. They approached the feeding swarm ships carefully, trying to get close enough for accurate weapon strikes. As soon as the bombers came within range, the swarm reacted. The smaller ships detached from the planet and swarmed toward the human fighters like angry bees. But something strange happened. Instead of attacking randomly, they moved in perfect formation, as if controlled by a single mind.
Ow.
They're coordinating their movements, Kevin reported to the fleet. It's like they're all connected somehow. The first battle between humans and the Void Swarm lasted only 10 minutes. The human bombers managed to destroy 3 small swarm ships before being forced to retreat. But those 10 minutes taught them valuable lessons. Back on the Washington, the command staff gathered to discuss what they had learned. They fight like a hive, said Dr. Kane. Each ship knows what all the others are doing. They don't need to communicate because they share the same mind. Captain Tony Garcia joined the meeting via video link from his destroyer. That explains their formation flying, but it might also be their weakness. If they all think the same way, they might all react the same way to the same threat. Admiral Clark nodded. What do you have in mind? On Earth, when you hunt pack animals, you don't try to fight the whole pack at once. You separate them, make them panic, force them to break their formation. Major Kevin White had landed back on the Washington and joined the discussion. I noticed something during the attack. When we hit one of their ships, the others nearby seemed to feel it too. They all flinched at the same time. That confirms it, Dr. Kane said. They're connected. Damage to one affects the others. Admiral Clark looked at the tactical display showing the swarm ships still feeding on the planet. If we can't fight them all at once, we need to find a way to fight them in smaller groups. Colonel Amy Foster spoke up from the Marine section. Admiral, request permission to attempt a landing on the planet's surface. If some of my Marines can get close to where they're feeding, we might learn more about how they operate. That's suicide, Colonel. The planet's atmosphere is probably toxic. Amy smiled. Ma'am, my Marines train in toxic environments every month. We have suits designed for chemical warfare. If anyone can survive down there, it's us. Admiral Clark thought about it. The plan was dangerous, but they needed more information about their enemy. Permission granted. Take 50 Marines and get as close as you can, but if things go wrong, you pull back immediately. 2 hours later, Amy Foster and her Marines were riding dropships toward the dying planet. The ships had to dodge floating chunks of rock and metal that the swarm had torn away from the surface. Sergeant Dan Moore was in the lead dropship, checking his weapon one more time. The Marines were wearing their heaviest armor and carrying experimental weapons designed to work in any environment, Sergeant Amy said over the radio. Remember, we're here to observe and learn. If we can capture some of their technology, even better. But don't take unnecessary risks. Yes, ma'am. The boys are ready. The dropships landed on what was left of the planet's surface. The Marines stepped out into an alien nightmare. The air was thick with strange chemicals that would have killed most people instantly. The ground was covered with a black substance that looked like oil, but moved like it was alive. Through their helmet visors, the Marines could see swarm creatures working on the planet's surface, or smaller than the ships, about the size of large dogs with multiple arms and glowing eyes. They moved in perfect synchronization, tearing chunks of rock apart and feeding them into large organic structures. They're like worker ants, Dan reported. Completely focused on their job, Amy watched the creatures through her binoculars. Just like ants, they probably don't think for themselves. The real intelligence is somewhere else. One of the Marines accidentally stepped on a piece of metal, making a loud noise. Instantly, every swarm creature on the surface stopped working and turned toward the humans. Contact, Amy shouted. All Marines, defensive positions. The battle on the planet's surface was unlike anything the Marines had experienced. The swarm creatures attacked without fear, throwing themselves at the human positions. But the Marines had advantages the creatures had never encountered before. Human weapons were designed to work in Earth's hostile environment. They functioned perfectly in the planet's toxic atmosphere. Human armor was built to protect against chemical weapons and extreme temperatures. Most importantly, Human training prepared them to fight in conditions that would panic most other species. After 30 minutes of fighting, the Marines had learned what they came for. The swarm creatures were dangerous in large numbers, but individually they were not as tough as humans. More importantly, they seemed confused by human tactics. They don't know how to fight an enemy that thinks independently, Amy reported to the fleet. They're used to fighting opponents who react predictably. Admiral Clark smiled as she received the report. For the first time since arriving at Arcturus, she felt hopeful. The Void Swarm was powerful, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. 3 days after the first battle, Admiral Clark had transformed her fleet into something the galaxy had never seen before. Using lessons learned from the Arcturus encounter, the human ships now moved in small groups called wolf packs. Commodore Jake Martinez, promoted after his excellent work coordinating the fleet's communications, led one of these wolf packs. His group consisted of 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers. They moved through space like hunters, searching for isolated swarm ships to attack. "Contact ahead," reported the sensor operator on Jake's flagship, single swarm vessel, medium size, feeding. On an asteroid, Jake studied the tactical display. This was exactly what they were looking for. One ship, away from the main swarm force, focused on consuming material. All ships, attack formation beta. Remember, hit hard and fast, then get out. Before reinforcements arrive, the human ships attacked from 3 different directions at once. The swarm ship tried to defend itself, but it was built for feeding, not fighting alone. Within minutes, it was destroyed. "That's our 15th kill this week," Jake announced to his crews. The swarm is starting to learn they can't spread out safely anymore. Meanwhile, Commander Lisa Brooks had made a breakthrough that changed everything. Working with captured swarm technology, she discovered how their hive mind actually worked. "Admiral," she called excitedly from her laboratory, "I found it. The connection between all swarm creatures comes from specific organisms they carry inside their bodies. Think of them like biological radio transmitters." Admiral Clark came to see Lisa's discovery. On the laboratory table was a piece of swarm technology that pulsed with a faint light. "These organisms send and receive thoughts across space," Lisa explained, "but here's the important part. If we can disrupt them, individual swarm creatures become confused and helpless." Dr. Peter Kane joined the discussion. He had been working on new weapons based on Earth's harsh environment. "I think I can create a radiation pulse that would damage these organisms. It's based on the same radiation that comes from Earth's fan." Alan belts. "How long do you need?" Admiral Clark asked. "Give me 2 days." While the scientists worked, Colonel Amy Foster was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her career. Intelligence reports showed a massive swarm hive on a planet called Kepler-4 for 2b. The planet was covered in toxic clouds and had gravity twice as heavy as Earth's. "Most alien species couldn't survive 5 minutes on that planet," Amy told her. "Marines? But we're not most species." Sergeant Dan Moore looked at the mission briefing with his usual calm expression. "Ma'am, how are we getting down there? The swarm has hundreds of ships protecting that planet. We're going to do something they won't expect. We're going in quiet during their feeding cycle when most of their ships are busy." The plan was simple, but dangerous. A small team of Marines would use stealth pods to land on the planet's surface. Their mission was to find and destroy what intelligence believed was a swarm queen, a creature that controlled entire sectors of the hive mind. Marines volunteered for the mission. Amy chose 20 of her best people, including Sergeant Moore and his squad. They would be on their own for at least 12 hours. The stealth pods launched from the fleet during the planet's night cycle. The Marines rode in silence as their pods descended through the toxic atmosphere. Gravity was so strong that normal humans would have been crushed, but these Marines had trained on high-gravity worlds. "Landing in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "Remember, these pods will dissolve in the atmosphere after you leave them. There's no going back the way you came." The Marines landed in a valley filled with strange, glowing plants. The air was so poisonous that it would kill most galactic species instantly, but the Marines' sealed suits protected them completely. "Move out," Amy ordered. "Target is 10 kilometers north." They moved through the alien landscape like ghosts. Gravity that would have slowed down other species actually helped them. Years of training on Earth had made their muscles and bones strong enough to handle the strain. After 4 hours of careful movement, they reached the target area. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined.
Ow.
The Swarm Queen was enormous. The size of a city building, connected to hundreds of smaller creatures by glowing tubes. "That thing is beautiful and terrifying at the same time," whispered one of the Marines. Amy studied the Queen through her binoculars. The creature was protected by dozens of swarm guards, but they were spread out across a wide area. "More, take your squad around to the east side. Wilson, you go west. My team will attack from the south. When I give the signal, we all attack." At once, the battle for the Swarm Queen lasted 6 hours. The Marines used every trick they had learned on Earth. They used the planet's toxic environment as cover. They used explosive charges designed to work in any atmosphere. Most importantly, they used teamwork and independent thinking. The Swarm Guards were deadly fighters, but they had never faced an enemy like human Marines. When one group of guards was destroyed, the others didn't adapt their tactics. They kept using the same strategies over and over. "They can't think for themselves," Don reported during a brief break in the fighting. "Without the Queen telling them what to do, they're just following basic programming." Amy realized this was their chance. All teams focus everything on the Queen. If we can kill her, the guards might become helpless. The final assault on the Queen took all of their remaining explosives. The creature fought back desperately, using biological weapons that would have killed any other species. But the Marines had trained with chemical weapons on Earth. Their equipment and their bodies could handle things that would destroy normal soldiers. When the Queen finally died, something amazing happened. Every swarm creature on the planet stopped moving. They just stood there, waiting for orders that would never come. "Mission accomplished," Amy reported to the fleet. "The Queen is dead, and her entire sector appears to be offline." Back on the Washington, Admiral Clark received the news. With a mixture of joy and amazement, her people had done something that 40 alien civilizations thought was impossible. Dr. Kane's radiation weapon was ready the next day. Combined with the Marines' success on the planet, humanity finally had the tools they needed to fight the swarm effectively. "All ship commanders," Admiral Clark announced to the fleet. "We now know how to hurt them. It's time to take this fight to their home territory." The human fleet began moving deeper into swarm space. For the first time since the war began, they were not just surviving, they were winning. The final battle began at dawn in the Omega Centauri system, where the Void Swarm had built their greatest hive complex. Admiral Clark looked out at the massive structure that surrounded what used to be a star. The swarm had consumed 3 planets and built them into a fortress the size of Earth's moon. "I count over 2,000 enemy ships," reported the sensor operator on the Washington. "This is their entire remaining fleet." Admiral Clark nodded grimly. Intelligence reports showed that the swarm was preparing for one last desperate attack. They planned to consume the system's star itself, using its energy to create an unstoppable wave of new ships that would sweep across the galaxy. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Clark. Today we end this war. Remember your training, trust your crews, and show the galaxy what humans can do." Commodore Jake Martinez led the first wave of attacks. His Wolfpack tactics had been adopted by the entire fleet. Human ships moved in small groups, hitting the swarm from dozens of directions at once. "Target the support structures first," Jake ordered his captains. "If we can damage their ability to process the star's energy, we might stop their final plan." Captain Tony Garcia took his destroyer squadron straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Phoenix and her sister ships moved like dancers through space, dodging swarm weapons while delivering precise strikes against critical targets. Garcia to all ships, watch for the radiation pulse. Kane's weapon should fire in 30 seconds. Peter Kane's radiation weapon had been mounted on every human ship in the fleet. When all the weapons fired together, they created a wave of energy that disrupted the swarm's hive mind connection across hundreds of kilometers. The effect was immediate and devastating. Swarm ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly became confused and disorganized. Some crashed into each other. Others simply stopped moving entirely. It's working, Kane reported excitedly. The hive mind is breaking down. Individual ships are losing contact with the central intelligence. But the swarm's central intelligence was not defenseless. Deep inside the hive complex, protected by layers of armor and weapons, the Prime Queen began her final gambit. She started, consuming the star's outer layers, feeding the energy directly into new ship production. Commander Alex Murphy's reconnaissance ships detected the change first. Admiral, energy readings from the star are going crazy. Something big is happening in there. Admiral Clark realized they were running out of time. All ships, full assault on the hive complex. We have to get inside and stop whatever they're doing. The battle became the largest space combat in galactic history. Human ships fought their way through waves of swarm defenders, using every tactic they had learned. The Deathworlder fleet proved why they had earned their reputation. Colonel Amy Foster prepared for the most important mission of her life. Her Marines would have to fight their way through the hive complex itself. Reaching the Prime Queen before she could complete her plan? 60 Marines for the final assault? Amy announced. The environment inside that complex will kill most life forms in seconds, but we're not most life forms. Sergeant Dan Moore checked his weapon one final time. Ma'am, what's the plan if we can't get back out? Amy looked at her Marines. These were the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced. They had volunteered to save civilizations they had never met, fighting an enemy unlike anything in human history. Then we make sure the job gets done anyway. The assault shuttles launched from the Washington, flying directly into the hive complex through gaps created by the fleet's bombardment. The Marines rode through corridors that pulsed with alien life, breathing air that would dissolve most species' lungs. The interior of the hive was a nightmare of organic architecture. Walls moved like they were alive. The floor was covered with substances that tried to digest anything that touched them. The gravity changed randomly as they moved deeper into the structure. This place is trying to kill us just by existing, one Marine observed. Good thing we're already used to that. Don replied calmly. They fought through 3 levels of swarm defenders before reaching the Prime Queen's chamber. The creature was even larger than the planetary queens they had fought before. Directly connected to the star's energy, glowing with power that hurt to look at. All Marines, remember your training, Amy ordered. We've faced worse things in Earth's oceans. This is just another predator that needs to be stopped. The final battle lasted 2 hours. The Prime Queen used every weapon in her arsenal. Acid. That could melt metal. Energy beams that could vaporize most materials. Biological weapons designed to kill any known life form. But the Marines had advantages the Queen had never encountered. Their armor was designed to work in Earth's most extreme environments. Their weapons functioned in conditions that would destroy most technology. Most importantly, they could think independently and adapt to new threats. When Sergeant Moore's squad finally reached the Queen's main body, they planted the largest explosive device humanity had ever built. It was designed specifically to disrupt the connection between the Queen and the star. Charges set, Don reported. All Marines get clear. The explosion that followed could be seen from space. The Prime Queen's death scream echoed through the hive mind, causing every swarm creature in the galaxy to stop functioning at once. On the Washington's bridge, Admiral Clark watched as 2,000 enemy ships simply went dark. The threat that had terrified 40 civilizations was over. Admiral, came Jake's voice over the communication system. We're receiving surrender signals from the remaining swarm creatures. It looks like the ones that survived the Queen's death are asking for peace. 3 months later, Admiral Clark stood in the assembly hall of the Galactic Preservation Council. Representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered to thank humanity for their service. When we first called for help, said High Counselor HFY, we expected the Deathworlders to be savage and violent. We were wrong. You're warriors, yes, but you are also protectors. Admiral Clark smiled as she looked out at the assembled aliens. Humanity fights not because we love war, but because we love peace. Sometimes to protect peace, someone has to be willing to fight. The ceremony concluded with an invitation for humanity to join the Galactic Preservation Council as its military guardians. Earth would take its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as the species that others could call when the impossible needed to be done, as the human fleet prepared to return home. Admiral Clark made one final log entry. Mission completed. The galaxy is safe. Humanity has found its purpose among the stars. We are the ones who answer when help is needed, no matter how dangerous the situation. We are Deathworlders, and we are proud of what that means.